Hi there. Welcome to part 2 of a winterization series. Today's video is called How to Winterize Your Feet. Last week we discussed how to winterize your hands, so if you want any more information you can go back and find that other video, or you could sign up for my weekly email at katielush.com and get more information there. But anyways, it is really cold in Chicago, real cold. So this is sort of the perfect topic for today specifically. I actually wore snow boots the last 2 days and are already incurring blisters on the backs of my heels as a result of the friction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are some good strategies that you can do to maybe not allow that to happen to you. So I'm Katie. Welcome. I'm coming to you live from downtown Chicago at the Pilates studio, Chicago River North Pilates, that I teach at. And so here are some tips and tricks that I give my clients throughout the winter to keep their feet mobile. So why do we care, right? I should probably start with that. Why would you even care to winterize your feet besides feet getting really cold, I would say, in the winter time? And I talked about this with the hands a little bit. You have, you've got veins and arteries, and you also have capillaries, which are like the very end extension of the venous system. So it's kind of the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. You have capillaries sort of all throughout your body, and if you don't use a body part enough, some of those capillaries will actually go away because you're not utilizing them, and therefore you don't need blood flow to the site, which is a little astounding. So if you go back to using a site that you have lost some capillaries in, capillaries will grow. Isn't that fascinating? So I think I'm pointing to my fingertip because that sort of seems like a pretty easy thing of how much do we really use some of our fingertips, especially pinkies and ring fingers. So the same thing applies to our feet. And our feet kind of take a bigger beating because of the fact that we're walking, right? They're wearing shoe wear a lot of the day. And we don't need to grasp things with our feet. So the perfect example is, when you wear a sock on your foot, it's kind of like putting a mitten on your hand. If you went through life wearing mittens all day long, it'd be very difficult to actually, utilize your hands in the best way possible. You'd feel duller sensation, it'd be harder to grasp things. Well, the same thing applies to your feet. If you're always wearing a shoe, especially a big, heavy, dense, hard to mobilize, stiff shoe, it's kind of like putting those shoes on your hands where, you can't move your hands, when there's a stiff surface on them. It's like putting a cast on your hands. Same thing applies to your feet, except that culturally it's a little bit more, It's more common culturally to be wearing shoes on a regular basis, especially nice, thick, heavy, maybe fancy, cool, expensive shoe wear. So the first thing we want to talk about is footwear, which I talk about ad nauseum, but I think it's really important that, especially in our boot season, the two things I think you're going to want to watch for the most are a really narrow toe box, which means the edge of the shoe that wraps around your toes. You want to watch that it's not a very narrow shoe, like a pointy shoe versus a rounded shoe. And the second thing about it is you want to watch for a heel. Does it have a pretty elevated heel to it, or is it a pretty flat and level shoe? So if you have a heel on a shoe, it really mimics as if you're walking downhill all day long, which is not ideal because you're not utilizing some other motions that bring your foot uphill. But also just being in a downward slope, if you've ever walked downhill for a period of time, your feet kind of shove into the fronts of your shoes. So if you have that narrow toe box, you're just taking that downward slope and jamming your feet into the edge of your, toe box, which causes a pinching sensation. It's kind of like little hoofs for hands. So I would say opportunity number 1 is to look for some minimal boots, shoe wear, or if you have to wear a heavy boot, take it off as soon as you can and walk around barefoot and try to cross-train your toes and feet from not always being in that thick, heavy, rigid, heeled shoe. Fair? Okay, number 2, to grow some more capillaries to our feet. Let's say for the last 40 years, you've been wearing shoes, for 8 hours a day, and you've been wearing high heel shoes with like a pointy toe box. Well, say today you want to change that. I highly recommend toe spacers as like a form of cross training. So if you think about if you've ever gotten a pedicure, you can slip toe spacers between your toes, like they've done that in the past. So you can have something kind of like soft and mobile, but they're not really meant to be walked on. I've got these, I have, like these that are sort of like yoga toes. That's another really common company. So I've used these with clients in sessions, which I think are effective. But I actually just bought myself some of these, which are called correct toes. And the beauty of them, as I'll get really close, is it's flat. Hopefully you can see that. It is flat. And then the inside is where the toes would spread. So because it's flat and it's actually pretty mobile, it's meant to be worn while you're walking. So I have these awesome socks that I wear at night called My Happy Feet that deliberately, they're like terry cloth spacers between the toes. So when I sleep for 8 hours a night, my toes are getting some really good separation, but it's passive separation. And I think what we need a little bit more of is like active separation. So if I slip this on and I go walking and, and I have to wear a minimal shoe or else this would not fit in a standard shoe with my toes, I feel like that would actually give me more motion in my feet. Hello. So these are kind of fun, and I just bought them earlier this week, and I've just tried them for the last 2 days, and it feels really good. But you have to adapt to them, so take some time. And then lastly, so you've got minimal shoes, right? You've got toe separation. You need to spread your toes out in order to, and if you think about it, it's like if you spread your fingers out, you have an opportunity to get more blood flow to your, extremities. If they're really tight and squeezed in, you don't really have that motion or mobility. Same thing with your toes. The more space and spread you have, the more surface area, and then therefore more of your foot is actually reacting to the ground and the ground forces. And so you will ultimately grow more capillaries as a result, which is kind of interesting. So we have minimal footwear, if you can find it, and I can give a list of ideas. Toe separation, passive and active. I can also list off all my favorite like tips and tools, devices. But then we actually have to like mobilize the feet a little bit more actively besides just spreading the toes. So my favorite is my rock mat. Oh, there goes my sock. So I am going to teach a tutorial on how to create these, but they're really nice to have because the rocks don't move. But if you put them on a surface and then put your foot on it and stood on this guy, it's kind of like reflexology for your feet. So all these little tiny points would kind of dig into your foot, and it can be kind of like a little foot massage. It would mobilize your feet. It would help with any stiffness, some blood flow. Somebody just told me it helps with your lymph system, which is kind of cool. But basically, it's just a mat, and if you just stood on it for any period of time, you can kind of move around, change your foot position. You would end up getting more mobilization in the bones, the small bones in your feet, and then therefore more access to those bones. And then when you go to use those bones, they'll need some blood flow, and then you'll have more capillaries, and then more blood to the site means warmer extremities, and then boom, you got warm feet. So a rock mat, you can make this at home, and I can tell you how to. I'm going to create a tutorial. Otherwise, you can put rocks just in a mat, a boot tray. But then here is a half cylinder for some calf stretching. So I'm going to bump you back a little bit because I want you to be able to see this. Oh, I'll just tilt you down. Look at that. Okay, so if I put it on the floor and I put one of my feet on it, I'm sort of counteracting what my minimal footwear did, which is going downhill all day long. Now my foot is actually going uphill. I can do it with one foot, and I can walk the other foot forward and get a little bit of a calf stretch, which is sort of nice. Oh, it feels really, really good. My calves are tight today. You could do both feet. So my heels are on the ground, the balls of my feet are on the half dome. And you can just breathe and hang out here. Pretty simple. It's again just to combat the fact that most heeled footwear tilts you down. You can also do what's called a soleus stretch, which is to bend your knees while your ankles are flexed up. Ooh, and just see if you have any range of motion there, which a lot of people don't. So something to be mindful of. So that would be calf stretching. Pardon me. Boop. Gotta get you going in the right spot. Sorry, Mr. Camera. Okay. But also, if I flip it over, it becomes a balance challenge. So again, it's more active movement and mobility. So if I flip it and I practice standing on it, shoot, I should just lean you down again. If I stand on it, it's a balance tool because it's a wobbly surface, and I can practice standing and balancing on one foot, which is challenging. It's very challenging. You can try the other foot. Same thing, just stand and practice balancing. Your ankle's gonna wanna wobble, which again brings more blood flow to the site because your muscles and joints are working, they're activated. If that's a little too challenging, you can flip it and stand on the rounded surface, which is also, you know, your foot's curving over a surface, so challenging. And then same thing on the other side. But they're just balance challenges to, again, bring blood flow to your feet, right? Building some more capillaries. Okay, so to review, we have minimal footwear. I should just show you my boots. But anyways, no heel, wider toe box, so that you're not walking downhill all day and that your toe box is not pinching your toes off. If they have been pinching your toes off, we want to spread those toes out and bring some blood flow. So you can use spacers, toe spacers. You can use like yoga toes or anything. I mean, you can buy these like at Walgreens at this point. But something to actually passively stretch your toes, maybe like the My Happy Feet socks, or something that you can actively stretch your toes with while you walk. These are called correct toes. Then you're gonna wanna mobilize your feet with an uneven natural terrain. So I like my rock mat, but you can also just walk on cobblestone. You know, you can walk in nature. But anything that would vary the way your feet stand on a surface. You can then take it into a true balance challenge with, you can use a half cylinder or even like a pillow. I mean, even if you stack a couple pillows, it's kind of the same idea that you're standing on something that's making your foot and ankle work a little bit. You could flip it, you can stand on the flat side and it's like a rocking boat. But all that, you know, shifting, shape shifting and adjusting is going to bring some blood flow to the site, right? So we want more capillaries, we want warm feet, warm toes, and we want fully mobilized feet and legs. And then you can also finish with a calf stretch, right? Your foot is uphill, your heel's on the floor, so it's combating, again, that downhill walking from being in a minimal shoe. So hopefully that helps winterize your feet. If you have any questions, feel free to write me in the comments. I'm always around. I think next week we might do like how to then winterize your entire body, not just your extremities. I just know that extremities get the most cold, so it's always nice to focus on them a little bit. All right, so that's it for today. I am done for the day, so I'm gonna take a little walk and get some blistered Band-Aids for my heels. And yeah, go spend some time in the cold. Get some adaptation and some new capillaries. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next week. All right, take care.